Hi, my name's Keith Cooper for Northlight Images. This is a Canon PRO-1100. It's a 17-inch printer. This video is a comparison between three 17-inch printers. That's the Epson P900, the Epson P5300 or 5370 in the US, and this, the 1100. Now I'll also mention some aspects of the older Pro-1000, since quite a few people have asked me if I get a really good deal on a 1000, should I get that or this? And I'm minded to say that if you can get a really good deal on a Pro-1000, consider it. Anyway, what I'm going to do is go through lots of features between the three printers. Now the P5300 and P900 I don't have here anymore. However, I did do a P900, P5300 video, specific one looking at those two, if you're curious between those two. But I'm going to cover a lot here. Please excuse me occasionally looking down here. I've had to put some notes on a small whiteboard and I've got all more detailed notes here. This is quite technical. I would say up front, if you are hoping for me to go, yes, this is best, buy this one, you are going to be sorely disappointed. It is very, very rare that I come up with things like that, because the answer is always, it depends. It depends on what you want the printer for, what your budget, what your usage is. So these three printers are actually, although they're all 17-inch pigment ink printers, they're actually quite different. And it's those differences that mean that one may be great for you, the other one just may not do what you want. So there's all sorts of little, there's that. If you've got any questions, please do ask. This will be quite a longish video because I've got a lot of things to go through. Right, first up, and I will get to the which is best print quality bit, but you're going to have to wait a bit for that. Either that or fast forward and have a hunt through, because there are lots of things. Up front, I could make a great looking print, an A2 print. Let's say this is an A2 print here, done on it's a borderless print, done on a glossy metallic paper. Now, I could actually make this print on two of the printers, but not the third. Although for many reasons I might consider the third one best. This was produced here on the Pro-1100. It's on a glossy metallic paper. It's Ely Cathedral. It's one of the sort of images I've produced specifically just for testing this. I took it years ago, but I've got a video looking at it on different papers and things like that. But anyway, the obvious differences: bulk, size, weight. The 1100 is about medium in the collection, and as I said, I will have to check the numbers. This weighs 38 kilos. If you want a P5300, that's 70 odd kilos. Mind you, if you want the P900, that's 15 kilos. Of the three printers, only one of them can I just lift and move and take to another room. This, I would want two people, ideally, to move it. It's just on the limit of what I can lift out of a box. The P5300, not a chance. You definitely need two people to move that around. So, size-wise, P900's this big, this is this. It's as you'd expect with the weight. The solidity of build between them. The 900, although I don't think it is, it can, because it's only 15 kilos, can feel a little flimsy. It's lighter than you expect it to be for the size of it. This is solid. It has, steel girders inside it. The 5300 is even more solid. That's based on the older P5000 chassis. It is rock solid. Not only does that have steel girders inside it, it has concrete ballast, apparently, just to make it a bit heavier and to stop it move. I don't know. I've never taken them apart, these ones. They're Epson's printers, Canon's printers, so I don't think they'd appreciate me just pulling them apart to find out what's inside. I do look inside, but I don't pull them apart. Anyway, that's size, weight. If you haven't got the space, you haven't got the space. So you need a 900. That's just a simple consideration. Don't forget as well that when you think about space, depending on papers you're using, you will need space at the back. Now, this one doesn't have a straight through print path. The 900, the 5300, they do have a straight through print path. You can load board into them. It will go through the printer and come back out again. That means you need, if you're printing on something like A2 size board, you need quite a bit of space. Mind you, if you're using the rear feed slot on this one and tip that down, there is quite a bit of space required if you're putting sheets of A2 paper into the back of it. Allow for the space you need. As I say, the 900 is the most compact. The 900 is, of the three, the most consumer oriented. This Pro-1100 has the same print head that you'll find in the Pro-2100, 24-inch printer, 4400, 2600, 4600, 66, I believe, 100. Anyway, bigger printers. So this has the print head that you get and the same ink set that you get with the larger printers. So if you'd got a larger format Canon printer and you wanted a 17-inch for printing on smaller sheets, because remember, bigger printers don't print on sheets so well. If you wanted that, then you'd go for one of these because you're using the same ink set, not quite the same profiles because there are differences between how they're set up. But effectively, produce prints on this, they will match your prints produced on the Canon large format stuff. The Epson 900 and 5300 share the same print head. Now, that means that from a profiling point of view, they're almost identical in terms of settings and other things. Like there's minimal differences between them. But that is not the same print heads that you will find and precise inks that you will find on the larger Epson printers. Now, with good profiling as you do, these differences are minimal, but it's something you might want to consider. Depends on what you're doing. If I had a large format Epson printer, would I be concerned about the P5300, the P900 not being quite the same? Not really. I don't think anyone's going to notice the difference. But it's one of those things that I should point out that there's a difference there. Right. Basics there. What about paper? The old Pro-1100 had what I considered the best paper feeding in terms of sheet paper feed, reliability, ease of use of any desktop printer I had tested. That was years ago. Other printers have got better, but still the paper feeding of this, whether it be from the back slot, which always seems a little clunky when you're using the back shot, or the top slot here, are very reliable. They work. I've never had any problems. I didn't have any problems with the 1000. And since this is pretty much identical to the 1000 in many respects, mechanical respects, I mean, there are going to be changes over the period of time, but in that respect, they're the same. In terms of sheet feeding, this is excellent. In fact, if I had to pick a weakness of the P900, it would be its sheet feeding. It's fine, don't get me wrong, but if we're splitting hairs here, the vacuum system on this holds the paper flat as it goes through, just gives a bit of reliability for that. Now, P5300 also has a vacuum system. Sheet feeding on that is interesting. Now, it is a little bit of a knack to learn how to feed the sheets at the top. You can only put one sheet at a time, though, in the P5300, whereas with this one here, I can load up several sheets in the top here. Can't in the back, but I say the back always seems a bit of almost like a bit of an afterthought. You wonder why it's not changed to be a straight through path as well, but it is what it is, and it's not not a problem. This one here, stuff just feeds into the top. Oh, there we go. When I said you need to allow for space around your print, this goes for all printers, by the way, but you do need to allow for these things. You can stack several sheets here. It feeds well. It works. The 5300 has a paper tray as well, so single sheet loading, or you can use the paper tray. Now, I have put A2 photo paper in the paper tray of the 5300, And P5000. I've got a P5000 here. This paper here, this is Permajet's titanium gloss metallic, superb paper for the right sorts of image. With that one there, I put a whole box full of this at A2 into the paper tray of the P5300, and it works. It just works. Sounds great. What's not to like? Remember margins. There are problems with margins. If you want borderless, you can do borderless on this. You can do borderless on the P900. No problem there. You cannot do borderless on the P5300 unless you are using roll paper, because it's got a built-in cutter. Now, I'll come back to roll paper. So there are limitations on paper sizes. There are limitations, for example, on the minimum paper sizes that you can do. P5300 does not support small paper. This, you can put postcards in it. 900, you can put postcards. Incidentally, 900, you can do DVDs and CDs in a holder if you still want to print those. So there are subtle differences, and those differences belie the market that the company is aiming that at, or at least the market initially it thinks it's going to be aiming it at. So the 900 is a little bit more consumer oriented. This is a bit of both, and the 5300 is a bit more pro oriented. 5300, if you were printing out 8x10 glossies, you could just load up the sheet, the tray with 8x10 paper, and boom, out they come. Just don't ask for borderless. If you want borderless on that, you need to use roll. Now, roll paper. Quite a few people were disappointed when this didn't come with roll paper attached. Yeah, I suspected from other developments that this was always going to be a development of the 1000, not something radically new. And sure enough, it doesn't have roll paper support. Now, this one does support long sheets up to 10 foot. Now, I've looked at panoramic prints and things. I've got videos, and I will have more videos to go with when I finally do the full detailed review of this. Now, long sheets. Long sheets are incredibly awkward to handle once they get beyond a few foot long. The idea of feeding a 10-foot sheet of paper, because it needs to be a sheet, because it needs to detect the end of the paper, through this, collecting it as it comes out here. Yes, you can, but you need to have a pretty good reason as to why you wanted to do it. Ordinary panoramics, and I say ordinary panoramics, say about so big, no trouble at all, load those through, absolutely no trouble, just take them out, print, works great on this. Likewise, you can put sheets, not as long, into the 900. But the 900 has an optional roll paper attachment. The 5300 has roll paper built in. The two are chalk and cheese. They are miles apart. The P900 roll unit is a great bit of engineering, how it works and how it attaches and things like that. I just don't like the way it rests the print surface of the paper on rollers. Now, have a look at my reviews and things like that. May not matter if you're printing on sort of photo papers, then that's not necessarily an issue. But for expensive art type papers, the 900 roll feed, I'd be a bit wary about it. Also, it doesn't have a cutter, so you better have a good set of scissors if you want to do that, or a roller cutter or something like that. Handling big sheets of paper gets inconvenient. Literally handling them, keep your fingers clean. On some papers, I do use cotton gloves. Some papers, I don't. Certainly when I'm doing this testing, I don't, because these are test prints. It doesn't matter if I get the odd fingerprint on them or something. They're not being made for sale. If you're doing stuff for sale, can make a considerable difference for it. Now, roll paper, works great. On the P5300, as I said, a cutter. So you could do borderless on the P5300 at certain widths, because it will print to the edge of the paper, and then it will cut precisely top and bottom so that you get a borderless print out of it. So you can do borderless. If you wanted to do borderless 8x10s on the P5300, and do lots of them, you would get an 8-inch or 10-inch roll of paper and set your sizes, and it would just cut them. Now, remember to, when you're using roll paper that comes off rolls, depending on the paper, sometimes after you leave it out a while, it will go fairly flat. Other papers, it will just keep a curl as long as you leave it, and you'll need to press it out between books or something like that. Just an inconvenience there if you think of. But 5300 has a cutter. That works great. If you're going to print canvas though, the cutter is not rated at printing lots and lots of canvas. In fact, no cutter on any large format printer is rated for day-to-day canvas cutting. Not of the sorts of printers that I test here. They're industrial, sort of commercial level printers that do have hefty cutters in them and things like that, but not for this. If you want to print canvas on this, you cut sheets of it. On the 900, you can run it through, if you've got a suitable canvas, you can run it through using the roll unit, but you need scissors. On the 5300, I would use set cut marks and I would use scissors on it. That's just for handling canvas, but they'll all print on canvas. There's no real difference between it. In terms of paper quality, you may have heard of things called pizza wheel marks. Some shiny papers can be affected by the output rollers. Now you can turn this off on the P5300, but P5300 you have a larger trailing margin. Now margins are another issue on this. The most flexible margins are on the 900. On this one, Canon suggests margins, minimum margins to use for certain paper types. If you want to use them without those margins, such as print borderless here, you have to override it. Now, it depends on the paper as to whether you put the settings that you have to do, but margins can be an issue. If you're printing sheets on the 5300, you have a larger trailing edge margin. Why is that? Because there needs to be something, as the paper comes through, there needs to be something to grip the back end of it and feed it out, because with this there is something pulling at the front and driving at the back, likewise with the 900. So check the fine details. I'm not going to go into any more details of those. Check the fine details of the margins if that's an issue for you. As you see, all of these little things, they are things that you may go, why is he mentioning this? I don't care. Well, you may not care, but there may be somebody else looking for one of these printers for a particular role that they want for their business, for themselves, that really does matter. And that's one of the reasons why I say there is no simple answer of best, because the differences are quite subtle and some quite distinct between the printers. As I said, this one has a vacuum system that holds the paper flat as it comes through. Now, you still, with any of these printers, if you've got paper curling up at the corners, you're going to have potential problems with head strikes, which you don't want. Now, I know this has got a replaceable print head because it's a consumable item. These have a predicted lifetime of a few years, the print heads. The Epsons, the two Epsons, which use the same print head, that is a print head that's meant to last for life. There's a different technology at work here. Is it an advantage having a replaceable print head? It is if you expect it to potentially fail, but if you don't expect it to fail, does it make a difference? I've never seen it as such a clear-cut distinction as some people would like to make. Each has their pros, their cons, their different ways of doing it. But, as I said, this one here, also the vacuum system, that means it's quite noisy. It's not really noisy, and you can put it into a quieter mode of operation. The 5300 is a lot noisier, because it has hefty fans drawing air through it to avoid dust collection, for the vacuum system, all sorts of things. So it makes quite a difference. 900, have it on the desk next to you. It's fine. This one, not so bad, because you'll be tending it when it's printing. The 5300, you would not want to have somebody else's 5300 sitting next to you in an office. The noise is quite noticeable, but it's a commercial machine. Everything is sort of engineered a bit more solidly. So it's a different use. So if you need quiet, 900. And that's, that's the one without the fans. Do the fans make a lot of, the vacuum system, do they make a lot of difference in print handling? For some papers, not always. Now with the 900, there are ways you can feed paper in at the front. There are all sorts of different ways you can feed papers into this. You're going to have to look at the details to find it. But I'm looking at differences which might make a difference to whether you wanted something or not. And so that's noise. Now, onto the subject of inks. Before that, I'll get a coffee. Remember that anything you read from Epson or Canon about inks is largely written by marketing departments. Now, it doesn't mean it's not true. It means it's written with a message. It's written with a point of view. So, first up, number of inks doesn't make that much of a difference. I'm going to mention Gamut and all sorts of things, but let's have a quick think about the costs of inks versus the costs of the printers. Now these are approximate UK prices. They vary. You can find deals, offers, sorts of things. Depends how many of the printers the company has in their warehouses and how desperately they want to shift them. Hence why I mentioned good deals on the Pro-1000. Anyway, the 900 is about 1100 quid. The 1100 is also about 1100 quid. This is October 2024. This has not long been released. The 5300, 5370 in the States is around about 2100. So there's quite a distinct difference between prices between them. If you look at the cost of the inks per milliliter, and here I'm just going to have to glance down here, 77 pence per milliliter on the P900, 68 pence for this, 41 pence for the 5300. Whoa, you think that's a lot cheaper on the 5300. 5300 inks are the same inks. Remember, this has 80 milliliter cartridges. The P900 has 50 milliliter cartridges. The P5300 has 200 milliliter cartridges. Big things like this. Now, how does this translate into ink use costs over time? When I was looking at the 5300 900 comparison, I worked out how much ink you would need to use by the printer to make up for the price difference between the initial price difference between the 900 and 5300. And it worked out that you needed to use up approximately 3 litres of ink. That's 3,000 milliliters of ink to make up the price difference. Now the inks here are slightly cheaper than the 900. Well, they're 77 versus 68p, so yeah, they are cheaper than the 900, and they're more expensive than the 5300. That means that, to match the costs between this and the 5300, I don't know, let's say you'd have to use up 2 litres of ink. 2 litres of ink, that's still quite a... 3 litres of ink is 6 complete ink sets for the P900. So quite a lot of prints. So you're not necessarily going to be splitting these two just based on the cost of the initial costs of ink. But remember, those ink costs are the ink costs to do printing. And we come next to a tricky issue that I can only touch upon because I don't get printers long enough to be able to do proper testing on this, is the amount of ink used for cleaning. If you switch this printer off for a length of time and then switch it on, I switched it off for a week when I went on holiday. When it comes back, there is a whole lot of ink used in cleaning. Now, that's about a cartridge, about a cart's worth of ink. It's like less than that actually, but yeah, I'll need to check the precise figures from it. I don't remember absolutely everything for these, but anyway, these use more ink in cleaning. So that means that when you compare the ink costs, say, between the 900 and this, because this and it depends on how much you use the printer. If you use the printer every day, your proportion of ink used in cleaning is much lower. Goes for the 900 and 5300 as well, but much less so. The cleaning cycles on this is more aggressive than the Epson ones. What that really means is that ink costs between, for say, medium amounts of use, ink costs between this and the 900 are going to be in the same ballpark. They're not going to be wildly different. Now, if you switch this printer off and only switch it on once a week to use it, your ink costs with a printer like this, and I mean switch it off, unplug it at the wall. If you do that and only print every other week or something like that, or every week, then your ink costs are going to be really quite high because of the amount of ink that it will use up in cleaning. The cleaning on this is nowhere near as smart as the cleaning that you get on the larger format printers like 2600, 4600. They have additional sensors in them. This doesn't. So this one does a little bit of just in case. You'll also get ink agitation on this one. That doesn't use ink, that's purely just making sure the inks don't settle. Any inkjet printer with pigment inks anyway, I always take the cartridges out every 6 months, give them a gentle shake for 10-15 seconds and put the cartridges back in. Just to keep the inks from settling. They don't settle that much, but it's something that can happen. So their ink costs, it's a tricky one to do. And I wish I could give more solid information on this. The only thing I can say though is that, yeah, sure, the inks are cheaper on the 5300, but you need to do quite a bit of printing before that starts to pay. Now, you might decide there are other reasons for that you want that particular printer. That's fair enough, but don't base it just on ink costs. Now, in terms of software that keeps track of ink costs, there is maintenance software. Accounting software available that will run on this that will give you quite fine-grained cost analysis, but doesn't include amounts used for cleaning. So it'll tell you how much ink you're using up and how much you're spending on making your prints, but it won't tell you overall use of ink. So that you're going to need to keep your own records, and then you can potentially work out how much ink is going for cleaning, how much is going onto paper for things that you can actually sell. Now, all printers use up ink for cleaning. This is by no means a criticism of that. That's how inkjet printers work. They use the ink as a working fluid, much as an engine has oil in it. You don't do that, they stop. Clogging. I've had people say, oh, Epson's clog. Maybe some did in the past. I see no particular difference in terms of clogging, as it were, for printers that get used often enough between Epson and Canon. Now, if you don't use your printer much, then you will increase the likelihood of problems. Now, I've left printers for a while, started them up, and they've been fine. That's perhaps I've been lucky sometimes. But the best way of killing off printers is to use them very infrequently. If you only ever do infrequent printing, don't get yourself a printer like this, or especially the 5300, or the 900. You know, pay someone to do your prints for you. I'm not saying printing is for everybody. Yeah, if you don't use the printer well enough, you are going to increase the likelihood of problems. I won't say you'll cause problems, but you definitely increase the likelihood. Incidentally, if you do have to go away for an extended period of time and you can't find some way of exercising the printer, seal them in a plastic bag. Keep them somewhere not too cold, not too hot, and you'll increase your chances of your printer being healthy when you get back. Now, what about, in terms of, somebody asked me about traveling. Was a printer like this a good idea because they lived 6 months of the year in somewhere else and then, they moved every 6 months? Printer like this does not like being moved. If you want to ship this printer, you need to put it into a shipping mode, which will use up lots of ink and a maintenance cartridge. All three of these printers have maintenance cartridges. They fill over time, not something to worry. There's no significant difference between them. However, because of the design of the ink system of this one, it is much more difficult to ship and move. In fact, there is a sensor underneath that will detect if the printer has been lifted up and moved, and will probably do an extra clean or something like that. These printers are not made for just taking out, putting in the back of your car and taking for event printing and something like that. The 900, maybe. The 5300, no, it's just too big. I mean, if you're going to set it up at an event for, you know, a few days and do it, then, and you've got somebody to help you shift it, and you can put it in the back of a car, not tilt it up too much, that is much more movable. But this one, this is a printer that you install and you don't move. Or if you do, have those spare cartridges and maintenance cartridge ready. That's nothing to do with the quality of the printing, just one of those things that you might want to consider. And it might make a difference, it might make no difference whatsoever to you. And once again, it's why no such thing as best. All three are good. Best depends. Software. Canon software, the PPL print software, works great. Epson, EPL, their print software, that works great. So there's no real difference between them. I mentioned accounting. Epson doesn't have accounting software as such, but you can connect your printer up to the Epson port system. And this is a cloud-based system which will collect data from your printer and allow you to do remote printer management, all sorts of things like that. Not something like it's very much, once again, aimed at commercial side of things. 5300 supports it. 900 is listed as supporting it, but I don't recall testing it. Did test the 5300 and I thought, well, this is nice. No use to me whatsoever. But likewise with the accounting software on this. You know, this is more granular, you could get more details out of this. The Epson you can get details out of it, but it's not quite so easy to do it. But then again, the port software may work really well. And if you've got other Epson printers, if you're a commercial printer and you've got other Epson printers, it allows you to keep track of all your Epson printers and see what they're doing, what state they're, how much media they're using, all sorts of stuff like that. Now, longevity of prints. Let's go back to something a bit contentious. I made that warning about marketing materials. The ink set in this printer is a new ink set compared to the Pro-1000. And there are a few changes in it. It has a much better yellow in terms of its resistance to fade. Canon give numbers, 60 years, 200 years and things. Take these with a big pinch of salt because they are not figures supplied by any independent testing authority. I have no reason to doubt that the inks are improved because yellows tend to fade. The problems is almost always. Does this mean that they are now vastly superior to Epson? No. I'd say, who knows? Ask me in 120 years and I'll let you know which prints have faded the most. There is not that much between it. However, this also has an improved matte black. Yep, that's good. And in the right circumstances, and it is all about the paper you use, the settings you use. Yes, on matte papers, the blacks on this are fractionally darker than I saw when I was testing the P5300 earlier this year. Now, that's numbers I can see on a graph. How does that translate to real life pictures? There is not much difference between them. Anyone who is concerned about a Dmax of, that's the maximum black density, of let's say 1.65 compared to 1.69 or 1.7, those are differences that it is incredibly difficult to spot. If I did two prints, put them next to each other on here, on the two different printers, let's say black and white prints, what differences would I note? Very little. Most people would not be able to spot the difference. If you do your own profiling, your own testing, you will see that where the real difference is, that matte black on art papers with well-profiled colour images gives you a bit more depth and dynamic range. And maybe it just nudges the Epson on that aside on that one, and this one gives you slightly better. But that's on the right papers. This is using the photo black ink. Other differences here? Well, there are slight gamut differences because of the colours that are used. The blues are supposed to be better on this. Now, be very careful when people start talking about gamuts for printers and papers and things like that. It is infused with marketing. It's also talking about stuff that nobody is going to notice. Now, could I create an image that looked better on this than it did, same paper, both made with custom profiles, that looked better slightly than an Epson one? Yes, I could. Could I, once again, create an image that looks slightly better on the Epson one than it did on this? Yes. The problem is, that's not a contradiction. The problem is people do not see such difference. And this is having them here with proper lighting, two prints next to each other. Put one print here under good lighting and another print 15 feet down the room here on the wall down there with identical lighting. And I have to look at this, then walk to that one, look at that, come back to this. Can I spot any difference? No, I can't spot any difference. The differences are swamped by the quality of the paper, the quality and effort that's gone into the profiling. And I've generated lots and lots, over a couple of dozen different profiles for high-end papers for this. This is excellent. But to say it's clearly better than the Epson, you can't say it's clearly better than the Epson. They are slightly different. Now, other issues. Remember, I'm not talking marketing figures here, I'm talking real life figures. Black and white, for example. Black and white is excellent on this. It's good on the 5300 and 900 as well. In fact, I might give this a bit of an edge. One only slight problem is that new black ink, matte black ink, on art papers. Yes, it gives you a deeper Dmax, but there's a strong propensity towards crunching shadows if you use the black and white print mode. So you really need to tweak things. Now, if you're into black and white at this level, you're going to be able to do the work to get the best results out of any of these three printers, such that you're not going to notice a difference between them. There are other reasons. I would probably just give the nudge at the moment for black and white performance to this one. And that's not because of the new black, because when I'm printing black and white, that new black causes me issues in linearity and setup. Can be worked around, and I've done some videos looking at different aspects of this. There's a special black and white media type that you can use for this, for example. Now, that's complex to use. Now, in terms of complex to use, complexity. The 5300 and the 900 have large touchscreens on them. This, as I find out every so often, is still based on buttons and a relatively small but colour display screen. The information here is quite small, the text. I need glasses on to read it. The Epson one is a much newer interface. This is exactly the same as I looked at on the Pro-1000 in 2016 or something like that. It feels, I'll be honest about it, it feels dated. Now, if you never do anything on the screens here, that makes no difference. However, if you're looking, you can see obviously the 900 is much more consumer oriented, that's simplified. It even displays a little, the image that's being printed appears on the screen here. Nothing like that here. Incidentally, for some reason, that doesn't happen on the 5300. Subtle difference between them. The 900 has a light inside it and a clear window on top, so you can see the print being printed. Now, you may think that doesn't make any difference, but it's one of those things that just gives you a bit of confidence when printing. Now, the 5300 has a window, but it doesn't have a light inside it. You can see the difference in age. The 5300 is based on the P5000 chassis. That didn't have lights in it or anything. And it's had the newer display put on it. Usability does matter. It's one of those sort of things like this. If you want to set the media type in advance from the screen here for using the top feed here, it takes no more than a couple of clicks on the buttons here. If you want to set the media type for the rear feed on this, it takes 17 button presses to get to set it. Now, usability. That's just a minor irritation, but it's one of my previous careers was in usability analysis and research, so I spot little things like this. Any other bits and pieces to go? Gloss differentials. The Epson print inks on glossy papers, because this has the colour optimizer, this gives a slightly smoother look. There's less, obviously, the ink sitting on the paper. It's a subtle difference, but the inks, the Canon inks, do perform slightly better in that way. You get much less bronzing from the pigment inks on glossier papers than you do on the Epson. It's not bad on the Epson, but it's something I need to consider on it. And that's, well, it's pretty much all of the different factors that I could think of. Oh, one other one there, scratch resistance. Another bit of marketing stuff. Nobody in the real world does that to their prints. The clear coat on the Canon is not a varnish substitute. It is not, doesn't suddenly make your prints so robust. It's about making them look better, which it does. It is not about something to make them robust that you can stick on the wall outside and, I don't know. But there is no real standardized way of scratch resistance for prints. I do not handle my prints, even test prints that I'm making, I do not handle them roughly enough that I've ever had a problem with surface scratching. If you are one of those, if you're using it for production use and you're doing the large format printers, then yes, I can see there might be a subtle difference there, but for printers like this, makes no real difference whatsoever. If you're clumsy enough to scratch prints, well, that's your own tough luck. It shouldn't be, wear gloves or something like that and take more care. Don't be in such a hurry. But it's a feature, but it's a feature that makes no real difference in choosing between them. I would say the biggest features that make a difference to people are ink costs. Although if we look at ink costs, the true costs are the cost of the paper you're going to put through it if it's decent quality paper. A2 sheets of paper are not cheap. Rolls of paper are not cheap. So think of that for it. Don't be put off by trivia of running costs. None of these printers are going to be really cheap to run. If you want a cheap printer to run, get yourself an ink tank type printer. That's the sort of printer that you're going to be using for that. Certainly not something like any of these three that I'm talking about here. They're not intended as cheap office printers. These are quality printers. All three I would be happy using for my own prints. And there is the key for it. All three of these printers that I've mentioned in most ways exceed the abilities of most people who want to use them, myself included on many times. These printers have got so good that the limitations, if you get a rubbish print coming out of one of these printers, then it's your fault. It's highly unlikely that the printer has caused it. It's some level of ineptitude on your part or mine that has caused the problem. And that's something very important to remember. I think the differences that people are going to make is going to be more size, weight, paper handling. If people worry about other aspects of it, such as printer gamut and things like that, well, go off, do the research, find out if it really matters. But in general, no. So is there a best? No. There are 3 great printers. No, I'm sorry, I said I wasn't going to say which is best. Which one would I use the most? Because I print on roll paper, because I've got a P5000, the P5300 would get my personal choice. But that's because of the type of printing I use and the amount of space I've got for it. It's nothing to do with the print quality. Would I be happy having this printer? Yeah, great. Would I be happy having a Pro-1000 with the older ink set? Actually, yeah, it's fine. It's a very nice printer. Most of the positives about this apply to the Pro-1000 as well. So you might well want to think about that. But there you go. I hope that's not too much of a disappointment. But if you know my reviews and things anyway, you'll hardly be surprised that I don't come out and say, yes, one is better than the other. Good. So are the others as well. Just depends what you want. Thanks for wading through this video, those of you who've made it to the end. If you've got any questions, as I say, just let me know. I'll be doing some more of this when I cover the full written review for this one. But enough said, end of video. Thanks. Bye.